we're about to sit in on and participate in a conversation with Donald Cole. He's a Fine Alliance mentor and a great human being. Let us have the director of the Math Alliance and professor at Purdue University, David Goldberg, come on and introduce the interviewer for discussion. Hi, David.
Hi, Oscar. Oscar, thank you so much. We're really happy to be closing on this note, as Oscar said. Before we go any further, first, thank you, all of you who have sent your birthday wishes. I feel very, very loved. Thank you. And thank you, Phil, for making that announcement so everybody could do that. So I want to return the favor, not today, but mark your calendar for November 24th, when it's Phil's birthday, and everybody please send him a text message and a chat or whatever. But so we really wanted to have Donald Cole close us out here in a conversation with a younger person especially. And so we're really excited we were able to set that up. I don't want to say too much about Donald because he has an amazing story, and I think you're going to hear it from him and his interviewer straight away. But I just want to say that he is one of our original mentors, and I, among many, I think we have learned so much about how to mentor and how to carry ourselves with some amount of poise in this arena. And he's one of the people I really, really admire most. And so I'm really glad he's agreed to do this. Our interviewer, in fact, can I have Donald and Fabrice both on? No, yeah, thank you. So that our interviewer is going to be Fabrice Ulysse, excuse me, and he just graduated this spring with a AB cum laude from Cornell University, and he's a GEM Associate Fellow, a Dean's Fellow. He's a first-year PhD student in the Department of Mathematics at the University of Notre Dame. Here at Purdue, we don't hold that against him too much, but
go Irish.
So, by the way, he recently co-wrote a blog post for the Mathematics Association of America entitled "Establishing Self-Care Practices While Pursuing a Math Grad Degree." And so maybe we have some students here who should consider making contact with him today. So we're glad to have him here. Take it away, Fabrice Ulysse.
Thank you very much, David. And Donald, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's an honor to have this conversation. Since you're someone that's had like a profound impact on undergraduate and graduate education at Ole Miss. And to the audience, I think that we'll be taking questions on Swap Card, and I think that Joan will be able to help us with that. So every once in a while, I might ask if the audience has any questions.
Surely. Thank you, Fabrice. It's a pleasure meeting you and to be able to do this interview. Congratulations on your success to date. And we look for someone to be interviewing you very shortly as you kind of finish all of your degrees as well.
Thank you. We'll see about that.
Okay.
So to start this off, I want to go back to 1970 in Oxford, Mississippi. And I think you know where I'm going with this. You took part in a protest.
I sure did.
Which resulted in you spending 2 nights in jail.
That is true.
Before you address that particular point, I want to talk about the prelude to that event.
Okay.
I think you might have spent at least 1 or 2 years at Ole Miss at that point.
That's right.
And so just walk me through what the campus was like back then, and what caused the need to protest in 1970.
Okay. Thank you so much for asking that. And that's actually a question that for years I tried to avoid and didn't want anyone to even know. But now that it's out, then we might as well get the truth about it out at the same time. But I entered University of Mississippi as a freshman back in 1968, and the university had just been integrated 6 years prior. And actually, I thought that integration meant that the university had been thoroughly integrated. But there were still pockets that had had vowed never to teach a person like me, never to serve a person like myself, etc. And as I began to run into those pockets, then I became very uncomfortable. And Fabrice, if you were to ask your dad, or whether your granddad now, or whatever, about the status of America in the late 60s, they will tell you that America was in a chaos. Everything was being protested. The Vietnam War was being protested. Women's rights was being protested. Civil rights was being protested. And so as I entered and felt very uncomfortable there, then I began to protest as well. And that protest, as you mentioned, did lead to my and several others being jailed for a while, and 8 of us being suspended from the institution. And believe it or not, I was one of those 8. So that was what was happening back in the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay. Wow. And I think, quite amazingly and kind of disappointingly, we might see some of the parallels from back then still today. This past summer, we had a very hectic summer, lots of protests for many of the same things that you might have been protesting when you were an undergraduate. And so you were suspended, and I believe you were also expelled.
Yes.
And so I think for me, the first thing that comes to mind is how did your parents react to that? How did your family react to that? How did you cope with it? Because I think that's everyone who gets to college, the goal is, get the degree. And I think in your case, you left with a jail certificate. So, how did that feel?
That's what I say. That's right. And so, of course, I wasn't pleased at the situation at the time. My parents had worked hard for me to get into the University of Mississippi. And you might imagine that I didn't come there by myself. I came there on the back of my church. I came there on the back of my community members, etc. Because I was probably the first one that they knew who was going there. And so people were rallying around me. And so you can rightly understand that after a year or so of being there and being expelled, that was something that was devastating, not only to me, but for my community as well. And my parents were supportive of me because they knew me. They did not necessarily like the fact that I'd been suspended from an institution. And Fabrice, at the time, I couldn't even get into any other institution because that was on my transcript. And so it was quite embarrassing at the same time. And so I left the state. I ended up working in the steel mills of Gary, Indiana, where I thought that I would probably spend the rest of my career. And so you could see why I would hide that part of my life and would not openly discuss that part of my life because it wasn't anything to be very joyous about. I've been to jail. I've been suspended in school. I can no longer get a degree. I'm relegated to the steel mills of out of Chicago, etc. And so that was a pretty devastating time of life for me.
I know that when in your first 2 years at Ole Miss, I think you were a freshman in engineering, correct?
That is correct. I started out in engineering, and I was doing okay in engineering, and I would have succeeded in engineering, and I would have gotten an engineering degree. However, I was doing very, very well in all of my math classes. And somewhere up in there, somebody must have hinted, I really don't know, that perhaps you should think about majoring in math or double majoring in something in math along with something else. And I did pursue that. And just a quick story on the side, because I can recall going to the math department, hoping that they would be very excited that they now have a new math major. And as I met the secretary there, I got something like a "what you want" I want to be a math major. She looked at me. You can't be no math major. I said, oh, yes, I can. I've taken several classes. I've gotten good grades, etc. And I was there to talk to the chair or someone. So she finally went and told the chair. And we ended up talking with her, messaging between the chair and I. So he would come back and say, you can't be a math major. And I would tell him, yes, I can, through her, and she would relay that message back, etc. So that was kind of interesting. But it ended up that before any major could be changed, that I was suspended from school anyway. So I thought that was a little null. But that's a second part of that story that with the chair and I that I will share a little later, where we actually happened to have met again.
I see. I'll try to get around eventually. Okay. So you got suspended, expelled. You head up to Gary, Indiana. You work in the steel mills.
Sure did.
What inspired you to enroll at one of the local colleges or universities to pursue a math degree?
Oh yeah. As I was suspended and as I was away, probably the thing that sort of kept me going, kept me stable was my study of mathematics. That didn't stop. So as I transitioned to the steel mill, I brought my books with me. Of course, I wouldn't read them, would not read them inside the mills. But as I got off, that would be how I would relax. That was how I would bring reality back to myself. That was still making me, be a part of academia, in some sense. And one day I got a letter from a little local college in Mississippi, a very small college called Tougaloo College, inviting me to come and be a part of their institution. You are welcomed here. And oh, was that a godsend for me. So I could go somewhere where I could actually talk about mathematics and talk literature or act as if I'm on the way to being educated. You can imagine that conversation was not having and taking place in the steel mills for sure. And so I was just pleased as punch to be able to enter Tougaloo College, and I could continue as a mathematician, as a math major, because math was so universal until just about any school would have that as a major. And that was really a blessing for me. It allowed me to get back in academia, and I put my heart in it. Every ounce of energy that I have went off into my studying mathematics at that point.
That's amazing. Because I think that even for myself, if I went through just the first part of that story, I don't know which direction I would have taken. And I think it's amazing that you still had the tenacity and you were still lucid and you knew what you wanted, and you were able to get that bachelor's degree. And it seemed like you did well enough. You went up to Michigan, you got a master's, and you got into a PhD program in my home state, in upstate New York, at SUNY at Buffalo.
Uh-huh.
But then you left. You left SUNY at Buffalo, and you went back to Ole Miss. And I know that you often whenever people ask you, why'd you go back, you like to flip that question back to the person who asked it. I honestly didn't have too many guesses because they expelled you. They were kind of mistreating you. You didn't care for your concerns while you were an undergraduate. And like you said, they were just coming off desegregating the university. And we know it's Mississippi, and Ole Miss has a long history with, how students like to use Confederacy symbols and emblems. So there's a lot of racial tension. and resentment at that place. And I personally, I wouldn't have gone back. But if you would, could you please explain why you would go back to Ole Miss to finish off your PhD?
Reed, you've studied for this interview well, and you prepared well, because that is a question that I'm often asked, and I don't know if I have a correct answer for. And so, and as you say, I will often take that question and I will flip it to the to whomever I'm talking. I would ask, well, what would be a reason that you could think of that I would go back? Why wouldn't you go back? Yeah, because I do disagree with you. I think that your love for your field, and I think your tenacity for them would have taken you back as well, and anyone else. I'm not sure, but there are people who can't quite see the logic, and I don't know if I saw the logic, if I've ever seen the logic either in terms of going back. But I've thrown out some things that perhaps make some sense to me, but don't know if that was the right answer or not. I had gone to the University of Mississippi to get a degree, and as you said a little earlier, I had left with a jail certificate. I had not left with a degree, and so maybe it was just the fact that I wanted I started out looking for a degree from that institution, and I wanted to complete a degree from that institution. That's as good of an answer as any. I had never been that much of a failure at anything, let alone at academics. And I had somewhat redeemed myself by getting back into academics at Tougaloo, and I even had 2 summers at Berkeley, where I took classes and did very, very well. And so I thought I could possibly hold up academically, and that the verdict on that was still out. So I hadn't actually proved that, and so maybe I went back because I wanted to prove that as well. But I think I'm going to do what I always do and have the audience to reflect upon me and myself and upon themselves, and kind of ask if you love something, if you wanted to succeed at something, if you wanted to do something, what type of reactions would you take? What would you do to make that happen? And I think that eventually, if you think long and hard enough, you'd say, okay, on the surface, that didn't seem like a very, very wise choice, but deep down inside, perhaps it was. And lastly, maybe the answer that rises above all of the others was that it was divine. It was intended to happen.
I think this is a good point in time for me to ask if the audience has any questions. I don't know, Joan, if you can pop in.
Hey, everyone. So Ruth Goldberg wants to know, how did Tougaloo College find out about you? So they, for them to invite you.
Oh, the whole state knew. Our case was in the news, and undoubtedly probably also in the national news as well. And so it was sort of very easy to find out about the case, but it was perhaps a little difficult to find out about each individual involved in that case. And so I was one of 8 who was suspended, and Tougaloo, I don't know how many they found, but at least 3 of us went back to complete our undergraduate degrees at Tougaloo. So it wasn't difficult to find to find the story, but maybe to run us down did take a little effort. And so that speaks well of that institution.
Great, thank you very much. We don't have any further questions for now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I think I also went through a similar path. I left engineering
No.
into math. So I was also curious I wanted to know what provoked the need to switch. Because I mean, you could always do math while in engineering, right? But I guess there was a certain approach that you might have liked in the math department as opposed to the engineering department.
Yes, I'll address that. And while I'm at it, it was something else I wanted to address that I mentioned a little earlier. But going along in engineering, I was enjoying it, and I was doing okay. In mathematics, I was doing very well, and because I was doing very well, I wanted to do even better because of so much. It was just so challenging. And the fact that I could meet some of those challenges just sort of did something for my psyche that was probably needed at the time. After a while, it seemed as if, well, the engineering is good, but it's kind of getting in the way of my studying mathematics. Because I kind of enjoyed studying mathematics. And somewhere up in there, I always thought of math as a science, and I refer to it as the queen of the sciences. And if you study any science, then you're going to definitely need your mathematics. And as I began to get into some of the higher levels of mathematics, I began to see the art in mathematics, and how beautiful it is, and how those proofs are constructed, and when something is actually proved, and what do you need to have it proved, and how do you take all of these little unknown parts and put them together and fit off into a proof as well. And so that was just so intriguing to me, and the logic in it, until I can never understand when someone say, "Oh, I don't like math. I don't take that." I hear it, but I know that they don't really mean that. That means that, oh, perhaps you hadn't had Dr. Cole for an instructor yet. Something of that nature is what it means. But let me perhaps mention something else, because I had mentioned this chair person back at the University of Mississippi who would not allow me to sit in his office and for us to have a conversation together. I ran into him some times later, years later, at the University of Michigan, where he was actually working on his doctorate. I believe it could have been in statistics or something of that nature. And somehow, as I walked in the math library there, I remember seeing him. Of course, he didn't know me from Adam, but I had a flashback on our conversation that we had through our secretary. And I really wanted to go over and confront him, really wanted to go over and remind him of that conversation, really wanted to go over and be confrontational. But I did not. And I just took the moment to simply reflect, and I kept looking at him. And he probably noticed my looking at him, and I think he got a little nervous and he left. And so that pretty much was the end of that. And I don't think I ever saw him since. I do recall that when I went back to the University of Mississippi to work there, and I was invited back, that same secretary that had told me that I could not be a math major was one of the first people to greet me and to welcome me back to the university. So I felt, in some sense that I'd come full circle. So when I actually finished my PhD at the university, I went off into industry.
Aerospace, I heard.
Stayed in industry for a number of years. And then I went back into academia at Florida A&M. And that, by the way, is where I first met Phil. And got associated with him and at the beginning of the alliance. But at any rate, as I was working there at Florida A&M, then I received an invitation from the university to return as an administrator and a member of the faculty at the University of Mississippi as well. And so that was a great honor for me to be able to go back. And it also and that was in the early 90s. And so that also lets you know how the nation was progressing, and how the school was progressing at the same time. And so as I spent my time there, then I recall what had happened to me as I was younger. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to make a path for others, and a path that wouldn't be one that would be had all the extremities as the path that I'd taken. Not have taken it long to the terminal degree process as my path had taken. And so it was not in any self-interest or glorification that I kind of launched my career there, but it was for individuals like yourself who would either be going there or be going to other institutions as well, that they would have a mentor that I never had, that they would have a knowledge going into it that I never had, that they would have a doctoral process that was similar to the other students that was in their program, and not one that was isolated in any way. So so I thought I'd mention those a couple of things there as well.
Well, thank you. I mean, those were some very, that was a great story that you just told us. And so I noticed, so you went back to get your PhD, and then you spent some time in industry, went to A&M, went back again. At those, 3 instances that you were at the school, did you notice a lot of progress in terms of how Black students felt on campus or other minority students felt on campus at Ole Miss? Because you left, you were protesting.
Yeah.
And, by the time you came back, were demands met? How were you still being treated while you were back there?
So those are some very good questions, because as you mentioned, I had 3 distinct stints at the University of Mississippi. First as an undergraduate student, where I was suspended, and then to come back to do a graduate degree there, my doctoral degree there. I left again, and then to come back to be a faculty member there and an administrator. And so I often tell people that from the entering there as a freshman until retiring there a year or 2 ago, that's over a 50-year span. And so having a 50-year history with the institution, and being who I am and the attitude that I have, then I'll answer, oh yes, I saw tremendous changes in the university, tremendous changes across the nation as well. And I mentioned that attitude part because I like to think of a glass as being half full as opposed to half empty. So I could easily say that, oh, I saw so little progress, but every inch of progress that I saw and that I still see in our nation, I've magnified. I mean, that glass is filling up to me, and it's not half empty at all. And so to be able to see that progress was probably where I got a lot of my strength from, and tenacity to make even more progress happen, to re-energize myself, if you will. And so when I was there as a freshman protesting, we turned our protest into some demands. And I think there were 27 demands that we wanted. We wanted everything from a minority person to be on the football team, to a minority person to be on on the faculty, etc. We had 27 of these. And so as I looked at and look around and sort of see some of this happen, and so in a given department, that might be just one person of color. But to me, that was significant. That was 100% more than they had before. And I could have looked at it, just one? Why one? Why not more than one, etc. And of course, that would give me the energy to fight for more than one. But yes, I do see the glass as half full, and I saw lots of progress, and I still see lots of progress. But I'm conscious of the fact that there's still lots of progress yet to be made, and the fact that I could be part of that progress at the University of Mississippi, pleases me tremendously. And before we even air off, I'll mention a little later with my tenure here as a faculty and administrator, how rewarding that has been as well. I'll just say something about that a little later.
That's great. That's great. I think another question that I had was, I understand that you probably grew up under segregation.
Yes.
In Mississippi. So you've been through a lot of dark moments in our country's history. And I think that, at least for my generation, we're coming out of a dark moment. Still a tough moment still. We had, over 70 million Americans vote for one of the most contentious, most divisive presidents in the history of our nation. I think I looked at a New York Times exit poll, and racial inequality was at the bottom of concerns for Trump supporters, whereas it was at the top of, top priority for Biden supporters. Racism is believed to be a minor issue now for Trump supporters, whereas it's a major issue for Biden supporters. So we are very divided. We are very divided. Maybe even, more divided than we were when you were protesting. And I guess what I'm wondering is, for the Alliance students, for the students that are coming up, what advice do you give for them, to keep pushing and to keep going, and how to navigate through, your life, trying to pursue mathematics in very troubling times in your country?
Very, very good question, and thank you for that question. Because if you sort of look at us today in terms of United States of America, we do seem divided. And I recognize that this is not the first time that we were a divided nation. And I'm fairly proud of my country, the United States. It hadn't always done the right thing at the right time, but it always has moved in the right direction. Never as fast as we would like for it to move. And I've learned over the years that justice is equivalent to patience. I've learned that fairness and equity is all equivalent to patience. And whereas I was brought up in the segregated past, where that was forced upon you, our younger generation, it's not forced upon them the same. So they don't have that same amount of patience. And that's why I think we see a lot of the contentions that we do see. But America is going to move into the right direction, and some of the tension that's caused is going to hasten that. And so I sort of recognize that, and I can appreciate the tension that's there, and I can appreciate their feelings as well. When I was, I'm retired now, but when I was at the University of Mississippi, I was at a university that had a very, very bad name, a history, if you will, in terms of race relations. And even our country doesn't have the best of a name in terms of race relations. But what's going to get us to the next level? What is it that's going to motivate us to fight together to move the country along in that right direction? Because there are people that have that, if you will, on their hearts. The people that wake up with that on their minds, and as you as a mathematician, you know that when in a given day you don't quite finish that problem, when you don't get it solved, you take that problem to bed with you. You think about it and you go to sleep. Maybe it's still in your consciousness. You wake up somehow with it on your mind, and nowhere do you ever see or say, that problem can't be solved. It is impossible. You might even think to try a counterexample, but it never leads you. And so just as you think about that in terms of mathematics, then there are people that thinking about moving us forward. This alliance probably should have never happened, but it was somebody who went to bed with that on their mind. Somebody who called a friend and talked about it, and they were thinking the same thing. That was somebody who made some progress in one direction. Matter of fact, I'm sure that I was probably part of the alliance because in one year the stars lined up at the University of Mississippi, where a number of African Americans that I had recruited, it ended up that perhaps 5 were to graduate in the same year with a PhD. And so that was a remarkable occurrence. And you can imagine how that motivated me. And so I was doing this in Mississippi. Field was doing something similar to that in Iowa. We had people in the West Coast doing the same thing. We had people up. And so when we began to get together and put our heads together, then the alliance began to form. And before long, we had bright individuals like yourself, coming along. And so I don't see this any different than the way that our nation will go as well. So we're at a very critical juncture right now, but it's it's one of those optimal points for which we're going to push the nation in the right direction. It's very rocky where it can actually go into the opposite direction. But because we are so committed, because interior to us, it's the right thing. Because that problem has a solution that we can't let go. Because all of this is coming together at one time, and at the time of our lives, that we're going to be optimistic enough to recognize that 4 years from hence, we're going to have a much better nation. 8 years from here, we're going to be converging even more. We might not ever get to where we have something perfect, but there's a limiting process, and we're going to just kind of push that limit to within epsilon.
You had to slide that in there as an analyst.
I had to throw that in.
I think we have about 5 minutes left,
Okay.
and I was told that we have a lot of questions
Okay.
in swap cards. So Drone, you can come in and then ask a couple of those questions.
All right. So Jasmine Fu wants to know, what advice do you have for students today who are dividing their time between activism and mathematical studies?
Oh, they go together. And of course, that happened to me. And I use the, I use the mathematics, if you will, to make that activism, real. I use mathematics to ground myself. And so I think those two can go together very, very well. The only caution that I would give is that you don't add a third and a fourth and a fifth, to it. That if you maintain those two, because if you are a minority student, then you want to help other minority students through, and you want to be a good student at the same time, and so those are possible. But if you throw a lot of other stuff in there, then it'll slow you down. But those two are not anything that oppose each other.
Thank you. And one final question. It's typically hard to transition back to academia when someone has gone to industry. Could you please reflect a little bit on this transition?
Well, surely. I wanted to my life to reflect both industry and academia as well. And I knew that if I went academia first, that I would probably not transition into industry. And it is, and it can be difficult going from one to the other. And I did find some difficulty. What was happening in industry was the fact that my projects was getting larger and larger. The staff that I was over was increasing in size. The budgets that I was handling were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And even my salary was growing at a respectable rate. And to then sort of leave some of that to go to academia was not easy. But a couple of things that compelled me, I looked around and queried myself as to how many people am I influencing here in industry? My boss loves me. A few other people kind of think highly of me. That probably a couple of folk that want to take my place, etc. And so I could probably count on both of my fingers the number of people that I was really affecting in industry. And I asked myself, well, how many people can I help? How many people can I affect in academia? And that number was exponential, of an exponential order. And so that made it easy when the transition came and the offer came. And I knew that it perhaps would be a cut in salary, but fortunately for me, it wasn't a very, very deep cut. It was more of a transition as opposed to a big cut. So I was fortunate in that sense. But once in academia, and you can't, after getting a PhD, you already know academia fairly well. then I was able to sort of jump in with both feet and begin to excel. I knew that I could start off with a research career. I knew how to start beginning to write grants and to go to conferences and whatnot. And so that part was something that was easy to come back. So I do admit that the transition wasn't totally easy. It was something that was doable. It was something that I wanted to do. And I probably timed it just right. So some people perhaps would say that perhaps I stayed in the industry a little too long. The longer that you stay, then the longer it is, the tougher it is to sort of make that transition. But I had the chance to work on an aircraft that's still flying. And every time that I hear about it, to see it fly, I just claim part of it, though I had almost little to nothing to do with it flying. But nonetheless, because I worked at project, it's very, very pleasing. And of course, academia would be something that was where I spent my career. So and I have others that I've trained and that are out there and that are representing me, etc. And I can't ask for anything better than that. And if I have another minute or two, I just might have mentioned something here at the university.
I think we went over time, but you could just say your last few words.
That's right. So I had a swell career here at the University of Mississippi. I've had a scholarship named in my honor. I've been blessed to be a part of the Hall of Fame of the Alumni Association. And most recently, there was a building that's going to be named in my honor as well. And so it was the right move to make, and the 25 plus years that I've spent here, the 50 plus years that I've spent with the University of Mississippi has paid off, and it's not the same institution that I entered, and the fact that I have a part of that change just pleases me tremendously.
Dr. Cole, thank you very much. I think we also appreciate your optimism, and that's very needed in these times. And I also like to thank the organizers for allowing me to have this conversation with you. And thank you everyone for coming in and watching this.
Thank you so much, Fabrice, and we look forward to hearing your interview.
Thank you.
Okay, you have a great afternoon.
You too.
Okay, thank you much.
Thanks, Donald and Fabrice, and also thanks to Joan Ponce, who was fielding the questions from the audience. That was an awesome conversation. I really like the chemistry across generations. It was very inspiring. And although it's sad to see that some things have not changed much, there is also some progress, right? And so I hope that this fills us of energy to keep pushing in the right direction. I really like Dr. Cole's, I'm going to quote him, "The glass is filling up." So, just keep at it.